I've done it 2 milestones within 30 days of one another, my GTI's 7th birthday, and over 200,000 miles of driving. I bought the car on Veterans Day in 2016, and today is Veterans Day 2023. Happy Veterans Day to those of you who celebrate it. I have mixed feelings on how I would quote-unquote celebrate Veterans Day. I think it means something different to different people. I am honored that people thank me for my service, but I've never been accustomed to hearing that. Instead, I am grateful for the ability to have served. I think a lot of people can't join these days. When I graduated high school over 35 years ago, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. No direction whatsoever. I basically followed some other kid into the Coast Guard. His dad had served in the Coast Guard and regretted not doing a career. And so when I joined with the expectation that I was going to stay for 20. You can't sign up for 20 years all at once, but that was my goal, just to get in and do 20 years. Well, I wound up staying for more than 20 years. I stayed for 30, and I still remain grateful for the opportunity. Growing up in the Coast Guard, and perhaps this could be true of other military branches as well, it allowed me to grow into a young adult in a structured environment. And the structure perhaps helped keep me from doing some dumb things and working closely with older adults. And so I learned things from these older adults that maybe you don't learn when you're just working around a bunch of kids all the time. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. When I bought the car on Veterans Day 2016, my driving schedule suggested that I might reach 200,000 miles by the end of 2022. I had been driving about 50 miles each way to work, and those miles were going to rack up fast. But I drove a whole lot less from 2020 to 2022. Anybody guess why? Even with back-to-back trips to California, I really didn't think that I was going to make it to 200,000 miles until 2024. But a few road trips in 2023, they were kind of unanticipated. I went to different ham radio conventions for exhibitions, such as Hamcation was a big one down in Florida. And I also supported a couple of bicycle tours, one out in St. Louis and another one in Nashville. And those put me past the 200,000 mile mark a whole lot earlier than I had anticipated. I'm sure a lot of you are cringing at the thought of putting so many miles on a GTI. In fact, I get asked all the time, many times over the years, where are you driving your car and why don't you put some of those miles, all of those miles, on something else? I'm recalling an interaction with a friend back, some 20 plus years ago. I was driving my brand new Volkswagen, another one, through the desert every day to and from work, 50 miles each way. And he says, "Oh my goodness, you need to get a clunker and put the miles on that and save the miles on your new car so it doesn't devalue so fast." And all I could think was, well, if I get a clunker and it breaks down and leaves me stranded in the desert, then what good is that? I have repair bills or I have fuel bills. Who cares? And guess what? 10 years later, I had my clunker. Actually, it took about 15 years for that car to become a clunker. And I drove it for 445,000 miles and loved it all the way to the end. Back to this car, just like the previous car, I made this GTI into my everything car. I use it for commuting, road trips, running errands, towing light loads, and recreation, to include my ham radio endeavors. Yes, I also consider driving to be recreation. I prefer to do all of this stuff in just one car instead of having different cars sitting in my driveway for various needs. Maintenance and fuel for one car may or may not be cheaper than having 3 cars, because if I had 3 cars, then I guess that would be all spread out over different chassis. But there's no doubt that I'm saving on insurance premiums and, in Virginia, property taxes. To be clear, I do have 2 cars in my household. One is my 2017 GTI, which I use for nearly everything. The other is my wife's 2018 Jetta SE, currently with 50,000 miles, which is used almost exclusively by her. And I say almost because sometimes we drive it to places where she wants to drive. She really hates driving my car. I don't even think she likes riding in it. She thinks that it's too loud and it, quote unquote, rides like a jackhammer. Those of you who've seen my exhaust videos, particularly if you have modified exhaust yourself, or perhaps you've ridden in the GTI on stock suspension, you got to be laughing at those accusations because my GTI is far more tame than most modified cars. Still, it's how she feels. Oddly enough, our daughter's 2015 IS-20 Golf, it's lowered on coilovers and it has no muffler. My wife doesn't seem to mind driving it. Somehow my car is the problem. All right, let's talk about my car and what's been replaced over the years. The car is modified, despite what the stock appearance may suggest. I had it programmed with APR's Stage 1 tune at 17,000 miles, and I upgraded the stock clutch with an RSR clutch kit by HS Tuning at around 35,000 miles since the stock one was starting to slip. So I upgraded the clutch not only to fix the slipping, but also to prepare for my APR Stage 2 upgrade. And I did that around 45,000 miles. And then I upgraded the turbo to a Golf R's IS-38 at about 128,000 miles. Now, I caught a lot of flack for my clutch slipping in, I don't remember which video it was, probably my 3-year video, and people have completely lost sight of the fact that my car had gone from 235 horsepower and around 270 pound-feet of torque to 300 horsepower, and I want to say it was like 380. So I basically added 100 pound-feet of torque at low RPM. There's no way the stock clutch was going to tolerate that. And even on your imports, if you were to add that much horsepower to a stock clutch, it wouldn't last very long. Sorry, that's just the way it goes. Everybody who does this to their car has to add more clamping force in that clutch. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So again, I replaced the turbo with a Golf R turbo at around 128,000 miles. And for those who don't know, that Golf R turbo swap, you can get, say, nearly 400 horsepower out of these cars. The turbo swap with my intake and exhaust, I probably am right around 400, depending on how you measure it. I'll say 360 to the wheel, those of you who know what that means, and the same amount of torque to the wheel. Eventually, the RSR clutch started to slip, and the slipping only happened under certain conditions, and I couldn't replicate those situations, but I also didn't want to. I just finished breaking in a Stage 2 endurance clutch by South Bend Clutch, and I've got a video in the works for that. I'll tell you about that later. My other mods include a complex suite of communications equipment and a Yakima roof rack to support some of it. This photo was taken in September during what is now a rare time without the roof rack on the car. The paint is ceramic coated and protected with paint protective film, although that I must admit that the paint under the roof rack, contact points, it is marred. It just happens. Let me show you some of the exterior of the car. I'm not going to do a full walk around. Now, the front of the car is what takes the brunt of the damage from things flying around. I'm going to show you the PPF, how it's been holding up. I think I might have told you already that I had my PPF replaced. I forget what the mileage was, maybe 180,000 miles, somewhere around there. And so the PPF is still fairly new, so I'll be able to show you what the areas under the old PPF looks like. Here's a look at what it looked like at the 3-year point. You know, the PPF took a bit of a beating, and let me show you how it looks right now. Let me go ahead and grab everything and go outside. All right, so again, the front of the car takes the brunt of the damage. So here are the headlights. They were banged up pretty good, and so this is all just bug splatter at this point. The car is not, it's not clean at all. And so these still look perfect. The front of the car, let's see if I can find a spot. Now here is a new impact right here. This new PPF has actually peeled up a little bit from a pretty heavy impact here. And you might recall that I actually had a dent right here, and that's all gone. This is just bugs. I don't think that there's much value in you seeing this right now because it's just not going to show very much. But somewhere up here, here we go, this was under the old PPF, and so the detailer, he did a little bit of touch-up paint right there, but you can barely see it. And there's another spot like that on the car somewhere, but it's hardly visible. So I think everything has been pretty good. And of course now the entire front of the car, including the front fenders, is PPF'd. So not a huge benefit in that walk around. It's just not bright enough, and the car's dirty, so it's going to look imperfect anyway. But believe me, it is in fantastic shape for 200,000 miles, especially for 200,000 miles. I get compliments all the time on how great the car looks. Oh, and I also forgot, I removed the rear seat in order to support some of my electronics projects and this refrigerator that's up here behind me. So what has failed in over 200,000 miles of driving? Well, I got to say that my 3-year, 93,000 mile video, I got so many comments about how my XYZ car, it never had as many problems as your car. And these are cars that were driven like 10,000 miles a year, and I was way beyond that. So I don't know. I still felt at the time, and I still feel that the car's been fantastic. And I will say that the vast majority of anything that's gone wrong with this car happened years ago. I'll still go down the list though, just to catch you up on what's happened. In short, I have replaced 2 starter batteries, and just as a reminder, I am really abusive on starter batteries with all the electronics that is in the car. I've replaced 2 ventilator blowers. That's a little disappointing, but they're cheap and very easy to replace. I replaced the injectors, although only one had failed. The water pump thermostat and its housing, replaced those at about 115,000 miles, and I've had 2 carbon intake cleanings, the second one being right around 194,000 miles, so I've got a nice clean intake now. I replaced the brakes at 135,000 miles, and I've also replaced the driver's door seal and the seat bolster from me rubbing my rump on those surfaces as I enter the car. I've got stiff hips. And, I've changed the way I get in and out of the car, so I do still have some wear on my bolster, but it's not nearly as bad as it was. Of course, I replace the tires every 40 to 50,000 miles, depending on how well they wear. And I do maintenance items such as fluids, filters, spark plugs, and things like that. I have stayed with Volkswagen's recommended 10,000 mile oil change interval. And yeah, warm up your keyboard to blast me about that one. I have sent an oil sample to Blackstone Labs for analysis and will share their report in another video. Nearly everything else on the car is original, including the underpinnings and the mounts. The suspension, believe it or not, is still original. The factory wheel alignment is still perfect. It's never been adjusted. And I don't know, there might be something that I replaced that I've forgotten to report. The windshield, that's been replaced, but that's not Volkswagen's fault. But I can't think of anything major. The timing chain and tensioner appear to be in very good condition. The camshaft adaptation is at just minus 1.8 degrees, which is well below the limit of a tensioner that needs attention. The engine makes no unusual noises, has no stored codes, and it consumes less than a liter of oil every 10,000 miles. It drives fantastically. In fact, I recently returned from a 1,500-mile road trip, including a stop at the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga and fresh runs on the tail of the Dragon. So how many keyboard warriors are queuing up comments about how the car never should have made it this far, has too many parts fail, or definitely is ready to be junked at this point? As mentioned earlier, I caught a lot of heat on my 3-year, 93,000 mile video in 2019. So many shared that the car was done for. It was actually pretty laughable. The heat, quote unquote, that I got on my YouTube channel, it got me noticed and started its slow climb to where it sits now with nearly 10,000 subscribers. Thank you, by the way, those of you who have subscribed. Still, I have to admit that my car has entered a period of uncertainty, as would any car with over 200,000 miles. I might ask myself, will the car break down on my next road trip? Is it time for expensive parts to fail? Is it time to have another car, perhaps as a backup? And I really can say no to that. I don't do the backup car thing. I mentioned my previous car. It was a 98 Jetta TDI, the turbo diesel. So I drove that car almost every day for 17 years and 445,000 miles. And all of that was done on 10,000-mile oil drains. The car left me stranded just 2 times over that period. Once was a broken axle, and hey, it happens. And the other time was an alternator. And it didn't really leave me stranded. I guess I had to take the day off. I made it home on the battery with the alternator light on, and just changed the alternator in my driveway, so I didn't have to get a tow or anything, but it was inconvenient. The rest of the time I was able to see problems coming and just maintain the car. The reason I retired that car was due to rust in structural areas, the strut areas, and that was a common problem from the Mark III generation of Jettas and Golfs. The 3 cars that I had kept beyond the 10-year mark, being that one, a Nissan Sentra that I had, they are the ones that showed me that age affects a car more than mileage. So I'm pretty hopeful that my GTI, this car, will continue to be reliable at least to the 10-year mark, at which point I might not be far from 300,000 miles. Then I will ask again, is it time to replace the car? Is it time to make some expensive repairs? Will the car leave me stranded? There's always going to be a little bit of doubt on the car with so many miles on it, but you know what? Until then, I'm just going to maybe travel with some extra fluids or minor tool kits, perhaps some parts that I know that the shops aren't going to carry. And I'm just going to let it rip. What's the saying? Drive more, worry less. That's what I'm going to do. Maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I'm doing something right. I don't know. I know I'm going to have plenty of comments in this video about Volkswagens being junk and they just don't last, and that has not been my experience. Again, am I lucky or am I doing something right? Comment below. As always, I appreciate you being here, and I will see you next time. Take care.